The massive warship of the Cathar Empire cut through the darkness of space like a predator, its hull adorned with trophies from 100 conquered worlds. On the command bridge, Supreme Commander Forlag gazed at the tactical display with barely concealed disinterest. The main rebel forces had been crushed weeks ago, their fleets scattered across 3-star systems. All that remained was a small pocket of resistance, holed up on a desolate moon in this backwater corner of Cathar territory. Supreme Commander, Vice Commander Grack's gravelly voice carried a note of amusement as he approached, towering even among the naturally imposing Cathar officers. The final reports are in. It appears we're dealing with nothing more than a tiny force of Xylars. A rumble of laughter spread across the bridge. The Xylars were among the smallest and weakest of the Empire's subjugated species, diminutive, fragile creatures known for their docility and servitude. Standing barely 4 feet tall, with slender limbs and oversized eyes, they were more suited to maintenance work and domestic service than rebellion. Xylars! Forlag's brow ridges rose in surprise. They've never shown any capacity for military organization. Are we certain of this intelligence? Grack flicked his clawed hand dismissively. Confirmed by 3 separate reconnaissance drones. Apparently, these particular Xylars decided to play soldier. They've established a small base on the moon's northern hemisphere, using salvaged equipment and crude weapons. Pathetic, really. Another officer chimed in. Perhaps they're the last pets of the actual rebels, left behind to delay us while their masters escaped. More laughter erupted, the Cathar warriors relishing the thought of such a feeble enemy daring to stand against them. The Cathar were natural conquerors, 8 feet tall, with armored exoskeletons, immense strength, and technological superiority built over millennia of expansion. To them, facing Xylar resistance was like facing children with toys. Forlag didn't join in the mockery. He tapped his claw against the display, zooming in on the tactical overview of the rebel position. Something seemed off. The defensive placements were unusually sophisticated for Xylars, who lacked any martial tradition. The pattern of patrol movements shown by the reconnaissance data indicated a surprisingly effective security protocol. They've managed to destroy 2 of our scout drones, he noted quietly. Grack shrugged massive shoulders. Luck. Perhaps automated defenses left by their masters. Perhaps, Forlag conceded, but doubt lingered. He had conquered 37 worlds in his long career and learned never to underestimate even the weakest opponent. Nevertheless, I want more intelligence before committing our forces. Send in an elite scout team, full combat load, battle ready. I want eyes on the ground. Grack couldn't hide his surprise. Supreme Commander, you can't be serious. These are Xylars. We could bombard them from orbit and be done with this tedious cleanup operation, and risk damaging the resource deposits on that moon. Forlag countered smoothly. The Empire values thoroughness, Vice Commander. We will follow protocol. Grack acquiesced with poor grace, stalking away to issue the orders while muttering about excessive caution. Forlag continued studying the tactical display. Something about this tiny army bothered him. The efficiency ratios were all wrong for Xylars. Too high, too coordinated. Either these were exceptionally talented Xylars, or Forlag pushed the alternative thoughts aside. Such speculation was pointless without more data. The scout team would resolve his doubts one way or another. The scout team, 12 of the Empire's finest warriors, deployed in 3 stealth landers under the cover of the moon's perpetual dust storms. They approached the rebel base from different vectors, maintaining communication silence, as their training demanded. Squad leader Krell led the primary insertion team, his senses heightened by combat stimulants and decades of experience. Through enhanced optics, Krell observed the rebel base with growing confusion. The fortifications were crude by Cathar standards, yes, but showed remarkable ingenuity in their construction. Salvaged ship plating had been repurposed into defensive walls at precise angles to deflect energy weapons. Sensor jammers, obviously handmade, but effective nonetheless, disguised heat signatures and movement patterns within the compound. Most disturbingly, The Xylar soldiers moved with a discipline and purpose utterly alien to that species' typical shuffling subservience. "Command, this is Scout Leader Krell," he transmitted back to the orbiting fleet. "Target appears operational with approximately 50 to 60 Xylar-sized combatants. Defensive measures exceed expected parameters. Request permission to capture specimens for analysis." Forlag's voice came back immediately. "Granted. Maintain stealth protocols, if possible. Priority is identification and capability assessment." Krell selected a small outpost positioned half a kilometer from the main base, a sensor relay station guarded by what appeared to be 4 Xylar soldiers. A perfect target for a quick strike. "Teams 2 and 3, maintain observation of the main compound," he ordered. "Primary team will capture prisoners from the outpost. Non-lethal takedowns when possible." Under the cover of darkness, Krell led his 4-warrior team toward the outpost. The Kthar moved with surprising grace despite their massive size, their armor systems dampening sound and masking heat signatures. They positioned themselves around the small structure, ready to strike from all sides simultaneously. Krell gave the signal, and the Kthar warriors lunged forward with the speed that had helped them conquer the galaxy. But instead of finding surprised, cowering Xylars, they met an immediate and coordinated response. Hidden sensors triggered alarms, and the supposedly feeble aliens reacted with shocking speed. The first Kthar warrior crashed through the outpost door, only to be met with a spray of metallic projectiles that found the weak points in his armor with uncanny accuracy. He fell back, purple blood seeping from a dozen wounds. Another warrior was caught in some kind of improvised plasma trap that seared through his armor plates like they were made of cloth. "Ambush!" Krell roared, firing his disruptor rifle at an enemy soldier who moved with impossible agility, rolling and returning fire with a crude but effective energy weapon. What had been planned as a simple capture operation devolved into chaotic, close-quarters combat. The Xylars fought with savage efficiency, using the tight spaces of the outpost to negate the Kthar's size advantage. They employed strange fighting techniques, not the standard military doctrines taught across the galaxy, but something wild, unpredictable, and brutally effective. Most disturbing of all was their ferocity. These weren't the timid Xylars known throughout the Empire. These creatures fought with desperate hatred, screaming unintelligible battle cries as they launched themselves at enemies 3 times their size. Krell managed to grab one of the small soldiers, his massive hand encompassing the creature's entire torso. Instead of surrendering, the alien drew a concealed blade and plunged it into Krell's arm joint, finding the exact spot where the armor plates connected. The Kthar commander roared in pain, but maintained his grip, slamming the small warrior against a wall with enough force to stun it. "Fall back," Krell ordered, the mission now a desperate retreat. Of his 4-warrior team, 1 was dead, and 2 were severely wounded. They managed to drag their captured prisoner and make a fighting withdrawal, only surviving because reinforcements from the other scout teams provided covering fire. Back on the command ship, Forlag stared at the scout team's helmet footage with growing concern. The battle had lasted less than 5 minutes, but it cost them 3 elite warriors dead and 5 others wounded, against what should have been helpless Xylars. "Impossible," Grak muttered, watching the recording for the 3rd time. "No Xylar moves like that. No Xylar fights like that." Intelligence Officer Lyra, a female Kthar with unusual copper-colored plates and a reputation for brilliant analysis, studied the footage frame by frame. "The size is consistent with Xylar morphology," she noted. "But everything else, the movement patterns, the tactical responses, the willingness to engage in close combat with Kthar warriors, nothing matches known Xylar psychological profiles." The captured Xylar had been taken to the medical bay for examination, but had died of its injuries before reaching the facility. Its body was now laid out on an examination table as xenobiologists conducted an autopsy. "Supreme Commander," the chief medical officer's voice came through the communication system. "You need to see this immediately." Minutes later, Forlag stood in the sterile medical bay, staring down at the small corpse. The outer appearance was indeed Xylar. The proportions, the skin color, the general morphology all matched. But the xenobiologist had removed the creature's protective suit and outer garments, revealing the truth beneath. A disguise, the medical officer explained, pointing to the artificial skin layered over the creature's true form. Quite sophisticated. The suit enhances their apparent size slightly while maintaining the Xylar appearance. But the biological structure underneath is something else entirely. Forlag leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. What species? Something from the outer systems? The medical officer looked uncomfortable. We're not entirely certain, Supreme Commander. The biological markers don't match any species in our standard database. However, there is one curious detail. He pointed to the creature's hand, where strange markings were tattooed on the inner wrist. The deceased subject vocalized several sounds before expiring. We ran them through our linguistic database and found a partial match to an obscure dialect reported in classified encounters near the galactic rim. Lyra, who had accompanied Forlag, stepped forward with sudden interest. May I see that data? The medical officer transferred the information to her pad. She studied it for a long moment, her posture gradually stiffening. Supreme Commander, she said quietly, I need to access the Omega-level restricted archives. Forlag's gaze snapped to her. The Omega archives were the Empire's most closely guarded information repository, containing records of the greatest threats the Cthar had ever encountered. Explain, he demanded. I have a theory, but I need to confirm it. These linguistic patterns share characteristics with fragments recorded during the Crimson Gulf incident 60 cycles ago. Forlag felt a chill run through his armored form. The Crimson Gulf incident was spoken of only in whispers among the highest echelons of Cthar command, a classified disaster where an entire battle group had been lost to an unknown enemy. Access granted, he said, inputting his highest clearance codes into Lyra's pad. Report directly to me with your findings. 2 hours later, in Forlag's private command chamber, Lyra presented her conclusions to a small group of senior officers. The room was sealed and swept for surveillance devices, an unusual precaution that underscored the gravity of the situation. The evidence is conclusive, she stated, her voice steady despite the enormity of what she was about to reveal. The creatures disguised as Xylars are members of a species designated humans, a highly aggressive, adaptable race from a distant sector of the galaxy. She displayed heavily redacted reports and fragmentary records on the view screen. Humans are classified as an Omega-level threat species by Imperial High Command. Most records of them have been deliberately obscured or compartmentalized to prevent widespread knowledge of their existence. They are known for extreme adaptability, technological improvisation, and unprecedented aggression when cornered. Grak scoffed. I've never heard of these humans. If they're such a threat, why aren't they common knowledge among command staff? Because they terrify the high command, Forlag realized aloud, scanning through the limited information. According to this, the few documented encounters with humans have resulted in casualty rates exceeding 80% for our forces, despite our technological superiority. Lyra nodded grimly. Humans are physiologically unimpressive, smaller than Cthar, weaker, more fragile. But their psychology makes them extraordinarily dangerous. They exhibit a combination of traits rarely seen together: extreme pack bonding, technological adaptability, and what analysts have called desperate innovation, the ability to weaponize virtually anything when threatened. She displayed more footage from the scout team's disastrous encounter, highlighting specific movements and tactics. Humans are known to study their enemies extensively before engaging. They identify weaknesses and exploit them with precision. Most disturbing of all, they show no fear of death when committed to a cause, making them unpredictable by standard tactical algorithms. A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. These weren't simple rebels, or even the remnants of the uprising they'd been sent to quell. This was something far more dangerous. Why disguise themselves as Xylars? One officer finally asked. Psychological warfare, Lyra explained. By appearing as the weakest, most submissive species known to us, they encouraged our forces to underestimate them, which we did fatally. It's a documented human tactic, deception before devastation. Forlag turned to the tactical display showing the moon's surface. What do we know about their capabilities? Numbers? Weaponry? Unknown, Lyra admitted. But based on recovered equipment from the skirmish, they appear to be a special operations unit, possibly a reconnaissance team gathering intelligence on Cthar military capabilities. Grax slammed his massive fist on the table. Then we crushed them immediately. Full orbital bombardment sterilized the entire region. No, Fola countat. If these are indeed humans, and if they're as dangerous as the records suggest, we need to understand exactly what we're facing. A measured approach with overwhelming force, yes, but carefully applied. We need to capture their base intact, if possible, recover intelligence about their purpose here and their larger presence in our territory. He turned to his officers, his voice hardening with command authority. Prepare a full assault force. 3 battle companies with armor. Support. I want our best troops equipped with maximum protection. We hit their position with precision strikes. Then ground forces move in to secure the facility and any survivors. The assault began at dawn, local time. Cthar dropships descended through the dusty atmosphere, while precision energy weapons from the orbiting warships struck the outer defensive positions of the human base. The initial bombardment was calculated to disable rather than obliterate. Forlag wanted prisoners and intelligence, not a field of ash. The first wave of Cthar warriors, encased in their heaviest battle armor and supported by hovering weapon platforms, advanced across the barren terrain toward the smoking rebel position. Their confidence had been replaced by wary professionalism, all traces of the earlier mockery gone. These were the Empire's finest soldiers, and they moved with purpose and discipline. They were halfway to the perimeter when the ground beneath them erupted. Hidden mines, crude but devastating, detonated in carefully plotted patterns. Improvised explosive devices concealed in the rocky terrain tore through the Cthar formation. The humans had anticipated the attack path and prepared accordingly. Spread out. Defensive formation, the ground commander ordered, but it was too late for many of his troops. The initial blasts were only the beginning. From concealed bunkers that had survived the orbital bombardment, human defenders opened fire with a variety of weapons, some recognizable as modified alien technology, others completely improvised but no less deadly. What was meant to be a swift, overwhelming victory devolved into a nightmarish slog. The humans employed hit-and-run tactics, drawing Cthar forces into kill zones, then disappearing through hidden tunnels. They used the environment masterfully, the moon's lower gravity giving them mobility advantages, dust storms providing cover for flanking maneuvers. Most disturbing were their weapons. The humans had scavenged, modified, and combined technologies from a dozen different sources. They deployed chemical agents that corroded Cthar armor from within. They used sonic weapons that disrupted the sensitive balance organs of the Cthar, leaving warriors disoriented and vulnerable. They even employed crude biological agents, engineered parasites that targeted specific vulnerabilities in Cthar physiology. From his command post, Forlag watched in growing horror as the casualty reports mounted. His troops were dying at an unprecedented rate to an enemy fraction of their size. The humans fought with a savagery and ingenuity that defied conventional military doctrine. They seemed to anticipate Cthar tactics, countering each move before it fully developed. They've studied us, Lyra realized, analyzing the battle data. This isn't just a reconnaissance team. They've been observing Cthar military operations, perhaps for years, learning our procedures, our weaknesses. A sudden alert blared through the command center. A security breach had been detected on one of the support vessels in low orbit. Show-ma Forlag demanded. The tactical display shifted to internal security footage from the supply vessel Krelltak. A small group of human infiltrators, still disguised as Xylars, had somehow boarded the ship using a captured Xylar transport. They moved through the corridors with lethal efficiency, eliminating resistance before it could organize. How did they get past our security screens? Grak demanded, his voice tight with fury and fear. The disguises, Lyra explained. Our automated systems are programmed to give Xyler service personnel minimal scrutiny. They exploited our own prejudices against us. They watched in stunned silence as the human team reached the vessel's engineering section. With practiced precision, they deployed some kind of device, clearly improvised from scavenged parts, but obviously devastating in purpose. Evacuate that ship immediately, Forlag ordered, but the command came too late. The device detonated, and the Krell-Tak erupted in a blinding explosion that damaged 2 adjacent vessels and showered the battlefield below with burning debris. The blast pattern indicated that the humans had precisely targeted the ship's power core, transforming a supply vessel into a thermonuclear weapon. In the stunned silence that followed, Lyra's voice was barely above a whisper. Self-sacrifice as a tactical option. It's one of their documented characteristics. Humans will deliberately give their lives if they believe the strategic outcome justifies it. The loss of the Krell-Tak and the damage to the supporting vessels forced Forlag to make a painful decision. With casualties mounting and no clear path to victory, he ordered a full withdrawal from the moon's surface. We've lost over 300 warriors to less than 60 humans, he stated grimly to his officers. This is no longer a cleanup operation. This is a major security threat to the entire sector. The surviving Kthar forces pulled back, abandoning equipment and, shamefully, even some of their wounded in their haste to retreat. Orbital vessels maintained position but ceased bombardment, wary of provoking further human counterattacks. In the command center of the flagship, a somber council convened to assess the disaster. The once proud officers stood or sat in silence, the magnitude of their defeat sinking in. The Empire must be informed, Forlag finally said. A full report, unvarnished. The threat these humans pose cannot be understated. Grak, humbled by the outcome, nodded in agreement. We should request reinforcements. A full battle fleet, perhaps even planet crackers. And tell them what? Lyra asked. That we lost an elite force to a tiny army we mocked just days ago? That creatures a third our size outfought, outthought, and outmaneuvered the pride of the Kthar military. We tell them a truth, Forlag insisted. That we encountered an Omega-level threat species operating covertly in Imperial territory. That our existing intelligence on humans is catastrophically inadequate. That every assumption we've made about them has proven dangerously wrong. He turned to the tactical display, where the human base remained defiantly intact on the moon's surface. And we warned them that if these were merely scouts or a special operations team, the Empire may be facing a far greater human presence than we've ever imagined. Lyra compiled the report over the next several days, incorporating all available data from the failed assault. The document detailed the humans' tactics, their technological adaptability, their psychological warfare techniques, and most importantly, their existence within Kthar space disguised as a subjugated species. Before transmission to Imperial High Command, Forlag added his own assessment. It is my professional judgment that the human threat has been systematically underestimated and deliberately obscured within our intelligence apparatus. The suppression of information regarding previous human encounters has left our forces vulnerable to their tactics. I formally request a complete reevaluation of all potential human activity within Imperial borders and the implementation of new detection protocols specifically designed to identify disguised human operatives. As the fleet maintained its distant orbit around the moon, all attempts to monitor the human base were met with sophisticated countermeasures. Surveillance drones were hijacked or destroyed. Communication signals were jammed or, more worryingly, fed false information. The humans remained an enigma, their ultimate purpose unknown. Most disturbing was their silence. They made no demands, sent no messages, initiated no further attacks. They simply waited, their presence a mocking reminder of Kthar fallibility. What are they doing down there? Grak wondered aloud, staring at the tactical display showing the human base, now heavily fortified with salvaged Kthar technology. Learning, Lyra suggested. Every encounter teaches them more about us. Our weapons, our tactics, our psychology. Or they're waiting for extraction, Forlag added. If these are indeed special forces on a reconnaissance mission, they may have already sent their intelligence to a larger human presence elsewhere. In which case, they've already accomplished their goal. The fate of the human soldiers remained unknown. 3 days after the failed assault, all signs of activity at the base ceased. Thermal signatures disappeared, communication emissions went silent. When Forlag finally ordered a cautious probe of the facility, scout drones found it completely abandoned, stripped of all useful technology, and rigged with deadfall traps that claimed 2 more Kthar lives. The humans had vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared, leaving behind only questions and a deep sense of unease. The Imperial response to Forlag's report was swift and dramatic. The threat classification for humans was elevated to maximum priority. All Kthar commanders received new protocols for identifying potential human infiltrators. The casual dismissal of smaller species was formally discouraged in military doctrine. For Forlag and his fleet, the encounter left permanent scars. Warriors who had once laughed at the tiny army now jumped at shadows, suspicious of every Xyler servant, every small-statured alien in Imperial space. The Kreltak incident became a cautionary tale taught at the Imperial War Academy, a lesson in the dangers of underestimating an enemy based on physical size alone. Months later, as his fleet patrolled a different sector, Forlag stood alone on the observation deck of his flagship, staring out at the stars. The question that haunted him remained unanswered. How many more humans were out there, watching, waiting, disguised as the very species the Kthar dismissed and disdained? The Empire had laughed at a tiny army until they realized it had human soldiers. They weren't laughing anymore. Throughout Kthar space, the smallest species, once ignored or bullied, found themselves subject to new scrutiny, new suspicion. The mighty warriors of the Empire now looked at their diminutive servants and wondered, are you really what you appear to be? Or are you something far more dangerous in disguise? And somewhere among the countless stars, humans continued their silent observation, learning the weaknesses of the giant conquerors, preparing for the day when they would no longer need to hide.